Greetings to you, dear beloved. Welcome to this video, obviously, and we will continue our journey called the glorious and powerful return of Jesus Christ. And this is a topic, of course, that deserves to be dug deeper into, as even if it's happening on the earth, while the body of Christ has their realm in the heavenlies, of course. But it is good to know what will happen, and this is also part of God's plan, obviously. So let's dive into it further, and we will turn to the slides now. So this was the last one, and we saw in Zechariah 14 verse 12 that it's a terrible plague that awaits anyone who wants to rebel and wants to tries to thwart Jesus' march through the desert toward Jerusalem. It will not be very nice for them. You can see that, wow, flesh putrefying, and while they are standing on their feet, eyes putrefying in their holes, tongue in their mouth. My goodness, I cannot even imagine that. Well, let's continue. Those who dare to stand against the power of the radiant and blood-soaked divine warrior will be devoured where they stand, as if by an all-consuming fire, because that's the effect of fire. Before weak human flesh, the absolute unstoppable power of God stands unmatched, obviously. Later, the Apostle Paul would say that when Jesus comes, he will slay the Antichrist, the beast. And in the beginning, I call him the end times leader in the first phase of the 70th week. And he will slay him with the spirit of his mouth, and will discard him by the advent of his presence. Only by that will be enough to discard the beast. And also his armies, of course. That is in 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 8. During the millennium, when Jesus reigns, the prophecy depicts the Gentile nations as completely subjugated to the people of Israel and their king. That will be literally the case. Literally. However, they are not simply conquered foes. The Gentiles will actually take part in Israel's holy festivals. Did you know that? As is commanded, the defeat of the nations result in their submission to this cosmic king, evidenced by their annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. Oh yes, and that will be mandatory for them to attend. So just some remarks about this last, especially this last bullet point. It is important to also envision that when, and that will happen, when nations do not want to take part in attending Israel's holy festivals, then it will not rain in their land. It will stop raining, and of course their crops will what is the word? It will wither. So they will have not enough food by a long shot. That will happen if they don't attend Israel's holy festival, especially the Feast of Tabernacles, or of Booths if you want. Another remark is that the reason why Jesus warned repeatedly for Gehenna during his ministry on earth, he warned because every Jew knew what Gehenna was. Gehenna is a name for a valley, the valley of Ben Hinnom, the sons of Hinnom in that sense. And there was, in the past, was not only a dumping place, but it was also at one period of time a place where children were sacrificed to Moloch. Oh yes. Yeah, you recognize, huh? You've heard about that. That's where it happened. And that will be a dumping place in the millennium. Again, a dumping place where garbage will be dumped. And dead bodies of people who rebelled against Jesus' kingship, against the rulership of Jesus Christ on earth. So also people who are not righteous. So what is the word? Injustice. They are not just, unjust against their neighbors, or they double cross their family member or whatever. Then it could happen that they just fall dead and they will be transported immediately to Gehenna. And the thing is that while the nations are making their journeys of pilgrimage to Jerusalem, they will have to pass past Gehenna and they will see dead bodies there. So it will be a gruesome picture, but also a warning for everyone not to even try to rebel. That's the point. And that's also one of the functions, if you want, of Gehenna. So, just for you to have the picture a little bit clearer. We continue. We now go into a short overview of what we've been through up till now. Very high level. And then we will put an angle on a different place, let me put it like that. But it's still about the glorious and powerful return of Jesus Christ. Okay, let's start. As one of the final prophets, Zechariah skillfully presents a vision of the Messiah's return. We've seen that. Drawing from various other prophecies about the invasion and occupation of Jerusalem, combined with the desert prophecies of Yahweh's coming, Zechariah paints a clear and more comprehensive picture of Jesus' ultimate triumphant entry into Jerusalem. Not only does the Lord come back with his holy ones from heaven, but also with those who had fled during the final hours when the Antichrist forces controlled the city. Not only that, but also with those who were taken captive earlier by the nations together with the beast's forces and brought into their own country. They will also be liberated, obviously. So just to have it clear. So he returns then, not merely as a king from war, but as a liberator of the city itself, of course. As we conclude discussing the desert prophecies in the Hebrew scriptures, we note something quite remarkable. One need not even turn to the Greek scriptures to understand the beautiful and glorious biblical vision for the Messiah's return. They are very well phrased in the Hebrew scriptures. I think you already recognize that. I hope at least. Although many believers wrongly assume the idea of Jesus' return is purely a so-called New Testament doctrine, the truth is that the richness of the Hebrew scripture desert prophecies provides us with a vibrant, detailed, and glorious vision of Jesus' return. Even centuries before the Greek scriptures came into being. Do you recognize that? So there is much to learn also from the Hebrew scriptures. A lot is mentioned there with regard to the future. Prophecies regarding the return of Jesus Christ and what will transpire. This vision would have already been widely known and understood by God's people when Jesus and the apostles came along in the first century. In other writings by different authors, it has been noted that in the past there were even false messiahs, watch this, who misled people into gathering with them in the wilderness. Yes, it happened. And then marching together to Jerusalem. So they just mimic what will happen in the future. They were doing it back then already in Jesus' time on the earth. False prophets, false messiahs. And that's what Jesus warned again. This is likely why Jesus actually warned his followers not to go out into the desert, because messiahs will so-called reveal themselves, and they will reveal themselves in the desert. So-called liberating people will not be the case as such. Excuse me, a little sip. So Jesus warned his followers not to go out into the desert, seeking every new messianic claimant who came along, and that is in Matthew 24, verse 24 through 26. It is a well-known warning. I think we know about it. A well-known warning by Jesus. So it happened. And why did it happen? Because they knew the prophecies of the Hebrew scriptures. Jesus made clear that when the real Messiah comes, as described in passages like Deuteronomy 33 or Habakkuk 3, he will come shining forth like the radiance of the sun. So you cannot miss it. You will not miss it. That's the point. That's the message. His coming will be glaringly and unavoidably obvious again in your face. For even as the lightning is coming out from the east and is appearing as far as the west, thus shall be the presence of the Son of Mankind. Matthew 24, verse 27. And the last slide of the short overview. The narrative examined throughout the various desert prophecies was widely known already back then, and also believed by the Jews of the first century. Jesus, John the Baptist, and the apostles would have all been very familiar to varying degrees with this beautiful story of restoration. They were familiar with that. So this expectation is also clearly reflected throughout the Greek scriptures that build also upon the Hebrew scriptures. Be assured of that. So let's go to a next section. Let's look at the return of Jesus according to himself. By the time of Jesus and the apostles, the storyline of the Messiah's glorious coming and victorious march through the desert was already widely understood by God's people. Oh yes. The New Testament authors rarely elaborated on the story in great detail because the Hebrew scrolls already did that. Of course, there are exceptions where mysteries, secrets, largely hidden before, were expanded upon. The Greek scrolls authors clearly understood the first coming of Messiah was for atonement of sins, again within the framework of Israel redemption, of course. While the second coming is for judgments and rewards, both judgments for the rebellious ones, the wicked ones, the nations who oppressed and afflict God's people, and the rewards are, of course, for God's chosen ones that are liberated by Jesus Christ when he comes. Virtually every Greek passage speaking of Jesus' return looks back to the desert prophecies. The very first reference in the Greek scriptures to the blessed hope, so-called, comes directly from Jesus himself. He describes his return this way: "For the Son of Mankind is about to be coming in the glory of his Father, with his messengers, and then he will be paying rewards." Remember, he will be paying each in accord with his practice. Matthew 16:27, and compare that with Luke 9 verse 26. Later on in his Olivet discourse, Jesus says this: "They shall see the Son of Mankind coming on the clouds of heaven with power and much glory. And he shall be dispatching his messengers with a loud sounding trumpet, and they shall be assembling his chosen from the four winds, from the extremities of the heavens to their extremities." The four winds on earth, of course. Matthew 24 verse 30-31, and compared with Mark 13:26 and Luke 21 verse 27. And that is well known, of course. So let's take a look here at the following themes. Within Jesus' own description of his coming, we note the following themes. There are 8 themes, so to speak. Jesus calls himself the Son of Mankind. And that happens very regularly. He will come, that's the second theme, in great glory and power. Number 3. Number 4 is in the clouds. Number 5, he will come with his messengers. Number 6, he will come with the blasting of a trumpet. The next one is that his messengers will be gathering his elect. And the 8th one, he will be present, referring of course to his parousia. That is very important to just see the greater picture of how Jesus described his own coming. So envisioning currently, we can see this. Jesus comes on the clouds, dispatches his messengers to gather his elect from the four winds of the earth. Right? That we know already. We can see that before us. The chosen ones will be gathered in the wilderness southeast of Jerusalem. So try now to see that. It's important because it's not in Jerusalem yet in that sense. First gathering in the wilderness. He will get into judgment with them. And that will be in the Sinai wilderness in Edom. Then Jesus will land a certain place, and I'm going to expound on it later, of course. It will be somewhere. Again, you will see where it is. Later, more about it. And then he will liberate all his people who are still captives. That will happen after his landing. He will start the ultimate exodus, the greater exodus, and he will start that exodus toward the promised land, and of course specifically to Jerusalem. So I'm going to end here. I hope that slightly, step by step, you get a better, clearer, more refined picture of what will happen at the return of Jesus Christ. Ponder on it and also be glad for it, because it will come. It is unavoidable, obviously. Thank you very much for watching this video and hope to see you next time. Bye bye.